Hello everyone. Welcome back to another session of Elixir with me. Previously, we had looked at how to start a GenServer process under a supervisor, and we discussed two ways of doing that. We directly called the startLink function of RT2, which took in the list of children that was intended to be started under the supervisor. The other way was passing the GenServer under the application supervision tree. Aside from the built-in supervisor, there are also other ways in which you can create a supervisor, and in this video we are going to look at the module-based supervisor. With module-based supervisor, you are going to define your own supervisor module. Setting up a supervisor module is very straightforward. Let's go ahead and define one. I'll start by defining a file for our supervisor. I'll add it under the lib folder, but inside the gen demo where we have other gen servers defined, I'll call it the tracker supervisor. In the supervisor documentation, we already have a module-based example supervisor which is defined there. So I'll just copy and paste this, then customize it to our liking. That is changed. Then I need to change the children that I'm passing here is the customer tracker, and I'll just delete this so that we have an empty list. In the tracker supervisor, we have the use supervisor. This defines the supervisor behavior and allows access of the callback and the functions of the supervisor. It also automatically defines a child spec. That means if our tracker supervisor is passed under the application supervision tree or in another supervisor as a child of that supervisor is able to call the tracker supervisor child spec with the child specification defined. Then we have the supervisor startLink function of RT2, which is defined under the startLink. So when the startLink function is invoked, it's going to start the supervisor. So this function takes in a module name, the initial argument, and options. The option passed here is the name, which is going to register our tracker supervisor with its own module name. The initial argument that have been passed is the one that is going to be passed to the init callback when the supervisor is started. Finally, we have the init callback. This is where the children that are intended to be started under the supervisor are initialized. So you can see the list of children that are defined here, and we want to start the tracker server under the tracker supervisor. We pass it as a child with a tuple format. Then at the end, we have the supervisor init function of RT2 that is invoked. So this is the function that is responsible for initializing the children. It takes in the list of children and a keyword list of options, and you can see we have the strategy 1-for-1 which is passed. The tracker supervisor is ready to be started, and we are going to start it in two ways. We can start it by calling the tracker supervisor startLink function, or we can also start it by passing the tracker supervisor to the application supervision tree. So that means when you pass it to the application supervision tree, it's going to be started as a child of the main supervisor of our application, and it's going to be started when the application is running. Let's start it by manually calling startLink function, spin up the interactive shell, and call the tracker supervisor startLink function. We don't have to pass it anything, but we did not pass any default, so just pass an empty list for now. We can also pattern match it with an OK PID. This PID will be the PID of our tracker supervisor. We can go ahead and check the process info and just validate. This is the tracker supervisor that has been started. Pass it to the PID and let's see. You can see the registered name is the tracker supervisor, so that means our tracker supervisor has been registered with its module name. And we also have extra information in here. It's trap exit. We have the links, so these are the other processes that are linked to it. That's how you can start it. You can start it manually by calling the start link function. Now let's go to the second option. I will have to close the interactive shell because we have to pass the tracker supervisor to the list of children in the application. Let's pass it here. Remember, there are different formats of defining the child spec. You can define it in a tuple format, the way we have passed the customer tracker server here, or you can pass it as a model name, or you can pass it in a map format. The map format mostly is not recommended because it's prone to many errors. Mostly pass it as a tuple, or so as a tuple it's only the model name and the argument or the option that will be passed when the start link function is invoked. And as a model, you just pass the model name. So I'll just pass the model name here because we don't have any argument that we need to pass within the supervisor. When you pass it this way, the supervisor is going to invoke the tracker supervisor child specification and define the child spec function, which has the child specification defined in a map format. That's it. So we have passed it there. Let's start the application by just calling the ix mix file. Don't have much information here, but I will have to retrieve those information. Our supervisor is registered under a name. We can check if we can use that name to validate if this tracker supervisor is started. Actually, we have the supervisor which children of RET1 function, which takes in the supervisor, that we can use to check the children that has started under the main supervisor. Let's look at the registered name of our supervisor here. The registered name of the supervisor is GenDemo supervisor. We can go ahead and use the supervisor which children function and pass it the GenDemo supervisor name, and yeah, we can see, yeah, so here you can see we have the tracker supervisor which is started under the main supervisor, and that means it's running, and it's running with this PID. You can also validate that it's PID by calling the PID function, pass it 04400. If we check the process info of that PID, everything matches with the tracker supervisor. You can see the registered name is that, and that's the other way you can start the supervisor. When is it useful to define the supervisor module? When you want to increase the fault tolerance of your application. Let's say, for example, you're working with multiple workers or process like the GenServer, and for this process you pass it under the list of children in the main supervisor of your application. In the scenario where one of the child process keeps on terminating, it will be a threat to your application. And this is because the supervisor, which is the one responsible for restarting that child process, each time it terminates, it will get exhausted at some point. And this is because of the max restart option, which once that number is exhausted or is exceeded, it's going to affect the supervisor by terminating it. If the main supervisor gets terminated, all the other children that was started under it are going to be terminated as well. This means the whole application is definitely affected. That's it for this video. To recap, we have defined our own model-based supervisor, and also we have seen different ways of starting it by calling the start link function directly through the interactive shell, and also we have started it by passing it under the application supervision tree. You can also pass it under other model-based supervisors that you define, and this is mostly useful when you want to increase the fault tolerance of your application, and mostly when working with multiple processes or multiple workers. So that said, if you find this video helpful, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe for more Elixir tutorials. Thanks for watching and see you next time.